Energy flow in ecosystems. Energy flows, it doesn't just stay in one spot. This energy exists in many kinds of molecules. You know that water is a molecule and oxygen is a molecule. This energy cannot be created or destroyed. It always exists. However, it can transform from one kind of energy to another through a variety of processes. We'll start with how energy flows through living organisms by food. The first step in any energy flow through living things is with the autotrophs. Autotrophs, otherwise known as producers, these are the plants. They capture energy from the sun or from the environment and convert it into food through the process of photosynthesis. The heterotrophs are the consumers that eat those plants. They have to get their energy from other living things. They cannot produce the energy from things like the sun. Under the category of heterotrophs, there are many different kinds. Herbivores get their energy through eating only plants. Carnivores get their energy through eating other animals. And don't forget that animals include insects. Omnivores are organisms that eat both plants and animals for their energy, such as bears. They survive on berries and fruits, as well as things like fish. And detritivores, otherwise known as decomposers, these are probably the most important heterotroph in the ecosystem because they are the things that break down dead plant and animal material. Without the decomposers, everything that's dead would just be piling up and piling up. Sunlight is the main source of energy for all living things. The plants, and I use that term to mean a whole variety of things, not just plants, but also things like algae. They use a process called photosynthesis to turn light energy into chemical energy or food. You can see here, this is the chemical formula for the process of photosynthesis. They take carbon dioxide and water along with light, and they turn it into sugar and oxygen. And then those autotrophs, use their own sugar to survive as their own energy. They're also utilized by heterotrophs, the consumers that eat the plants. The flow of energy can be shown through a variety of diagrams. The first one is a food chain. This is a single line of predators and their prey. The next is a food web. This is a little more complicated. It shows the complex interactions, understanding that organisms don't always eat just one type of food. They might eat many different kinds of plants, or they might eat many different kinds of animals for their survival. And the last that we'll talk about is a food pyramid. This shows in measurable quantities how much energy is required to feed the next level in any given area. Food chains and food webs illustrate the flow of energy in an ecosystem. The direction of the arrows is important. You can see in this basic food chain that we start with a producer. The arrow points to where the energy is going when one organism consumes another. So the producers in this food chain are the plants. They, remember, get their energy from the sun. And then they pass their energy to the primary consumer. Primary means first. So this would be the first consumer in the food chain. In this picture, it's a mouse. The mouse eats the plant, so the energy passes from the plant to the mouse. The next thing to eat is the snake. The snake eats the mouse, so the mouse passes its energy to the snake, and then the snake gets eaten by the hawk. Secondary means it's the second consumer in the line. Tertiary means it's the third consumer. But notice that all of these consumers and producers all can pass their energy to decomposers if they should die before they get eaten by the next level. The decomposers, in turn, pass the energy back up to the producers just by breaking down dead material and then turning it into those basic molecules that plants need. Each step in this chain is called a trophic level. So now it's your turn. First, I'd like you to identify in this picture by name all of the autotrophs or producers. You'll find that this is part of your assignment, and I'll show you the autotrophs now. So on your paper, or with wherever you're putting your answers, I would write down the two sets of plants or the two sets of leaves are the autotrophs. The heterotrophs are any of the possible consumers in this food web. So see if you can list those on your assignment now. And I'm not just talking about the first level, I'm talking about all of the consumers or heterotrophs. Remember, if you need to pause in order to be able to write everything down, that's fine. Go ahead and pause the movie. The next thing I'd like you to identify are the herbivores. These are things that only eat plants, remember? And remember that the arrows in the food web are showing you where the energy passes to. So in order to find the herbivores, you're going to look at things that only eat plants. Meaning, energy is not passing through an animal to get to these things, such as the cricket to the frog. Next, please identify all the carnivores. These are things that only eat meat, or other animals in this case. Notice that these are things that do not eat both plants and animals. And last but not least, identify the omnivores. These are things that do eat both plants and animals. So look for arrows that are connected, that go from both a plant and an animal to one consumer. And notice there are only one. Only the mouse eats both the grasshopper and the plant. Chemosynthesis is another form of making energy. This is making food from chemicals. And some bacteria, like you see in the picture, synthesize or make food in this way. These bacteria live in deep ocean vents and make their food from the chemicals in those vents. Here's another chance to identify. Identify the autotrophs or producers in the picture. Now identify the primary consumers. So here you have to start breaking down the individual food chains within this web. Next, the secondary consumers. So these would be something that ate an animal that ate a plant. Just so you are clear, the mouse in the picture is a secondary consumer because first it ate the grasshopper, or because the grasshopper ate the plant. So you see there are two arrows that connect up to the mouse. Now identify the tertiary consumers, or the things that take 3 arrows to get to them. Also on that list should be the snake, but I see it's not circled. Okay, let's talk about ecological pyramids. This shows in a visual way how energy in measurable amounts can pass from one type of organism to another, usually in one particular area. There are many kinds of pyramids, like an energy pyramid, a biomass pyramid, or a pyramid of numbers. Any of those things are different things that can be measured. On the left, you see an energy pyramid. Notice how much bigger the bottom level is compared to the top level. In this particular food web, the largemouth bass, there are very few kilocalories that get passed on to the next level. Over here on the right is a biomass. So this is essentially saying it takes 10,000 producers to feed 1,000 grasshoppers. It takes 1,000 grasshoppers to feed 100 frogs or toads, and it takes 100 toads to feed 10 snakes. So you can see that what you need to start with, the box on the bottom, is much, much larger than what you end up with. So where does all that extra energy go? Recycling of matter in an ecosystem. The ecosystem is the first recycler. All of the matter that we have, the solids, the liquids, and the gases, they don't stop existing when they get to the top of the pyramid. They get naturally recycled through a series of different cycles. The molecules present in each part of the ecosystem, they don't get used up, they transform into other things. So some of the cycles we will look at are water, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. So the water cycle. In the attached PowerPoint, you can go through, find this slide, and then click over here for a better description of the water cycle. But the basics are as follows, and you should know this already. Water falls from the sky as precipitation. It goes down, running across the land, and either lands in a body of water like a lake or the ocean, or it sinks in through the soil into the ground and becomes groundwater. Eventually, that water gets brought back up to the surface where it evaporates, and then it goes through condensation before it becomes clouds and then precipitation again. Carbon does something similar. If we start up here in the atmosphere, carbon gets transformed into food molecules through photosynthesis, which happens in plants. So the plant uses the sunlight and the water and the carbon and turns it into something that both the plant and the animal can break down as food. Then other living things eat these food molecules. They die and decompose. They go into the soil. This decomposed material then turns into fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. And then we burn those fossil fuels, which returns the carbon back to the atmosphere. The nitrogen cycle is a little more complex. Nitrogen must have certain types of bacteria in order to complete its cycle. But if you start out with it in its gas form in the atmosphere, the bacteria, certain kinds of bacteria, turn it into a solid form that plants can use as part of their nutrients. Animals then eat the plants. The plants and animals both die, and you have decomposers returning nitrogen into a different form. Other bacteria continue to turn that nitrogen back into the gas form that's found in the atmosphere. So plants can't take the nitrogen directly out of the atmosphere. It has to go through the process, through the cycle, and through the bacteria in order for plants to use it. And the oxygen cycle. This one's relatively straightforward. Oxygen is produced through photosynthesis, which means our world must have plants, or the amount of oxygen that we have is going to significantly decrease. That oxygen gets released into the atmosphere, and then all living things use the oxygen during respiration. Oxygen is also used quite significantly through decomposition. So those decomposers use a lot of oxygen to break down the dead organic material.